in the small logging town of Pine's End, nestled between sprawling forests and mist-covered mountains, stories about the woods were as common as the trees themselves. But no story was quite as chilling as that of Elliott Grimes, a logger who claimed the trees screamed. Elliott had been a logger for years. His rough hands and scarred arms were testament to countless hours spent felling trees, dragging them to trucks, and sending them off to the mills. Life was simple and, for the most part, quiet. That changed the day they began logging a new section of the forest, a region filled with tall, slender trees with silver-toned bark, aptly named Silverspruces. From the first moment Elliott's chainsaw bit into one of these trees, he heard it, a faint scream, like a distant cry of anguish. He stopped the machine, looking around. No one else seemed to have noticed. Shrugging it off as an auditory hallucination, he continued. But with every cut, the screams grew louder and more desperate in his ears. At first, he thought it might be the machine. Perhaps it was faulty, producing some high-pitched noise. But even after checking and swapping chainsaws, the screams persisted. Elliott tried talking to his co-workers. Most laughed it off, jokingly suggesting the trees might be haunted. Others said he was working too hard and needed a break. But a few old-timers just looked away, uncomfortably, when he mentioned it. One evening, after most had left, an elderly logger named Abraham approached Elliott. With a grave expression, he recounted a legend about the Silverspruces. Centuries ago, the region was home to a tribe that held the Silverspruces sacred. According to legend, they believed the spirits of their ancestors resided in these trees. In a clash with settlers, many tribe members were killed, and their spirits, as per their belief, became one with the Silverspruces. Some say, Abraham whispered, that if you listen closely, you can still hear their cries, especially if you try to harm the trees. Elliott's sleep became restless. The screams echoed in his dreams, turning them into nightmares. He'd see the faces of the tribe, their eyes pleading, their mouths open in silent screams, their hands reaching out to him. As days turned into weeks, Elliott's demeanor changed. He became more withdrawn, his eyes constantly darting to the Silverspruces. The other loggers noticed his growing unease. Whispers spread, and soon everyone knew about Elliott's haunted experiences. Some avoided him, while others tried to help, suggesting he take some time off. But Elliott couldn't escape the screams. Even away from the logging site, every creak of wood, every rustling leaf sounded like those distant cries of anguish. He felt watched, haunted by the spirits he had unwittingly disturbed. One foggy morning, Elliott was found standing motionless among the Silverspruces, chainsaw by his side, eyes wide open but unseeing. He had a serene yet pained expression. No marks, no wounds. He seemed perfectly fine, save for the fact that he was completely unresponsive. The town's doctor was baffled. Elliott was breathing, his heart was beating, but he was trapped in a state of catatonia. He was moved to Pine's End Medical Facility, where he remained in that mysterious state. The logging company, fearing bad publicity and superstitious talk, halted operations in the Silver Spruce region. The trees, with their shimmering bark, stood tall and untouched. To this day, Elliott remains unresponsive, a living testament to the unheard screams of the Silverspruces. And while most of Pine's End has moved on, the old-timers sometimes whisper that on quiet nights, if you venture close to Elliott's room in the medical facility, you can hear faint screams, forever echoing the pain of the spirits he disturbed. In the deepest reaches of northern Canada, where vast pine forests stretch endlessly, there exists a remote logging site known as Camp Kaskae. It's so isolated that the nearest civilization is a day's drive away. The loggers who worked there were a hardy breed, accustomed to the solitude and eerie stillness of the vast wilderness. But in the winter of 2007, that solitude was disrupted in a way none of them could ever have imagined. It began innocuously. A worker named Cole first spotted it, a distant figure standing motionless at the edge of the tree line. It was dusk, and the fading light cast long shadows over the ground, making it hard to discern any details. Cole pointed it out to a few others. They laughed, suggesting it might be a curious local, or perhaps another worker taking in the evening view. But no one from Camp Kaskae recognized the figure, and there were no known locals in this desolate area. The next day, the figure was there again, just a little closer, still indistinct but undeniably present. Whispers spread through the camp. Who was this mysterious watcher? What did it want? As days turned into weeks, the figure continued its silent vigil, edging ever so slightly closer each time. Its persistence unnerved the loggers. Every tool's buzz, every fallen tree's crash was punctuated by uneasy glances toward the tree line. Paranoia settled in. Workers paired up, never venturing out alone. Night shifts were doubled, with powerful spotlights illuminating the camp's perimeter. Attempts were made to approach the figure, but as anyone neared, it would melt back into the forest, only to reappear the next day at its usual spot, still a little closer than before. Its features remained obscured, save for two gleaming eyes that caught the light in an uncanny way. One evening, gathered around a roaring fire, an old native logger named Nahani shared a legend from his ancestors. It spoke of the guardian of the pines, a spirit that protected sacred lands from harm. The spirit would first watch, then warn, and if the warning went unheeded, it would unleash nature's wrath upon the violators. Some dismissed Nahani's tale as mere superstition, but others weren't so sure. Incidents began to occur. Machinery malfunctioning for no reason, freshly cut logs found standing upright in the morning, and haunting whispers in the wind. The camp was divided between those who wanted to leave and those determined to stand their ground. Things came to a head one fateful night. A fierce storm hit Camp Kaskae. Amid the howling wind and pelting rain, the figure emerged from the tree line, this time much closer. Panic ensued. Workers scrambled to get inside their cabins, barring the doors. Through the night, the sound of footsteps circled the camp, mingling with the storm's fury. By morning, the storm had passed. The camp was in disarray. Tools scattered, tents torn, and machinery toppled. But the figure was nowhere to be seen. A collective decision was made to abandon Camp Kaskae. The loggers packed their belongings, and by nightfall, the once bustling site was deserted. News of the events reached other logging companies, but none dared to venture to Camp Kaskae. It was as if the forest had reclaimed its own. To this day, those who know of the story warn against disturbing the ancient lands of northern Canada, where the guardian of the pines watches, waits, and protects. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, travelers on distant roads swear they hear the trees whisper a warning to those who would dare to harm their sacred grounds. It's been 6 days since we first discovered the hollowed tree deep in the forest. I'm Jim, a logger working for Timbercorp. My coworker Pete and I were tasked with taking down an ancient oak, estimated to be over 600 years old. As soon as I laid eyes on it, I had an ominous feeling. The tree was freakishly massive, well over 100 feet tall, and covered in strange markings spiraling up its bark. Pete dismissed them as eccentric hippies or mischievous kids carving symbols into the tree. I wish it had been that simple. The deeper we chainsawed into the trunk, the more disturbed I felt. The symbols swarmed before my eyes, constantly shifting and intertwining to form patterns that mesmerized and revolted me. When we finally cut through to the hollow core, we found the tree's terrible secret, a corpse that by all rights should never have been there. It was a perfectly preserved human body, flesh still supple, eyes moist as if recently dead, but sealed within this ancient tree for who knows how long. Before we could even react, it awoke, jerking, expelling vile fluids, its limbs writhing. A living nightmare. We fled that cursed tree and its impossible inhabitant. But escaping proved nearly as impossible. When it tore Pete's door open and grasped for him, I was sure we were doomed. By some miracle, we made it out of the forest and believed the thing left behind, only to crash our truck when it returned even more horrific than before. Somehow we survived the wreck and escaped on foot. Staggering from the woods, we pleaded for help from truckers parked roadside. But the occult symbols on their skin betrayed them as servants of this evil. They summoned the creature with unearthly cries, sealing our fates. In the week since, it has toyed with us sadistically. We managed to barricade ourselves inside one of the big rig trailers, but it tore through like paper. It comes creeping in the darkest hours, picking at the walls, tapping on the roof, keeping us paralyzed in terror. That voice, it often calls to me in a twisted parody of Pete's voice, begging to be let inside. But Pete just mutters incoherently now, sobbing brokenly, completely shattered, and I fear I may soon join him in madness. Food and water are gone. It contaminated the truck's stores somehow, leaving them vile and rancid. No choice but to forage what we can outside, though venturing from this trailer risks a fate worse than death. Just brief glimpses of its flesh send me to the brink of insanity. Markings and symbols seem to shift and swim across its pallid skin even as I gaze upon it. But despite the horror, I must press on. I have to try and survive this. If anyone finds these pages, you must know evil takes root in that hollowed tree. It must be destroyed. I pray today to finally escape this forest, return to civilization and normality. Yet I sense the creature hurting me, keeping me trapped here as long as it pleases. I fear the symbols and markings I've glimpsed are seared into my mind. I blink and still see their outline flashing before me. Have I been infected somehow by its unnatural influence? Will I transform into another of its servants like those truckers? Is this the fate it has planned for me? No. I must fight to keep my sanity intact. But the endless torment chips away at my spirit, and deep down, I suspect my only release shall come through death. Still, I will continue resisting. That thing from the hollow wants me to surrender. It shall not claim my mind so easily. Perhaps these writings can serve as a warning if I cannot escape this forest. Beware the ancient oak and the secrets it hides. There are powers lurking nearer than we dare imagine. Darkness dwells within the hollowed tree, and it yearns to spread. It shall not have me.